September 2007. A windowless office in the financial district of London. A man stares at a spreadsheet, and the numbers are screaming. He is a mid-level analyst at a major global bank. His job is to model risk, to weigh the value of complex financial instruments built on the American housing market. What he sees isn't just risk, it's a suicide note signed by the entire global economy. The math is clear, undeniable. The towering trillion-dollar edifice of mortgage-backed securities and credit default swaps isn't just shaky, it's hollow. It's a phantom wealth engine built on the assumption that home prices in America could only go up. He knows what comes next, the collapse. Not of a bank, but of the system itself. He does what you're supposed to do. He writes a memo, a 20-page, meticulously sourced, mathematically dense warning. He sends it up the chain, to his boss, to compliance, to the risk committee. It is a fire alarm, pulled with perfect professional clarity. The response isn't panic or action or gratitude. It is silence. Then a quiet, firm suggestion to re-examine his overly conservative assumptions. The memo is buried. The machine must keep running. This man now faces a choice: fall in line or become a threat. He chooses to become a threat. He takes his evidence outside the bank, to regulators, to journalists. He becomes a whistleblower, a prophet with spreadsheets. And then, just as the first tremors of the crisis he predicted begin to shake the world in early 2008, he vanishes. This is not a story about the 2008 financial crisis. This is a story about the witness to the crime, the one who had the ledger, who could point to the exact line where the fraud began. And what happens to that witness in a system that cannot afford a trial? The setup, building the bomb. To understand why he had to disappear, you must understand what he knew. It wasn't a hunch, it was forensic accounting. By 2007, the global financial system had been transformed into a doomsday machine. It worked like this. Step 1, the bad loan. Banks gave mortgages to people who could never pay them back. Ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets. Step 2, the alchemy. These toxic mortgages were bundled together into a security, a CDO, collateralized debt obligation, blessed by a rating agency as AAA, as safe as a US Treasury bond. Step 3, the bet. Other institutions then placed side bets on whether these bundles would fail, using instruments called credit default swaps, CDS, creating a multi-trillion-dollar casino where no one actually owned the house they were betting on. Our analyst, deep inside one of the banks manufacturing these CDOs, saw the raw data. He saw the lies in the loan applications. He saw the flawed mathematical models the rating agencies used. He saw that his own bank's risk models were intentionally blind, because to acknowledge the truth would be to stop the most profitable machine in Wall Street history. He didn't just predict a crash, he had the serial numbers on the bombs. He knew which vaults were empty, which kings were naked. He could have testified under oath to the precise moment his bank decided to defraud its own investors and the public. That made him the most dangerous man in finance. Not to the system. The system was already doomed. He was dangerous to the people who ran the system. Because after the fall, there would be investigations. There would be a search for culprits. And he was a living, breathing map to their doorsteps. The whistleblower's journey, from insider to exile. His journey out of the bank follows a classic, brutal pattern. Phase 1, internal channels. His memo is ignored. When he presses, he is told he doesn't understand the big picture. He is invited to meetings where his concerns are politely dismantled by senior executives who call the toxic assets innovative products. The message: you are not a hero, you are a problem. Phase 2, going external. Desperate, he anonymizes his data and reaches out, first to the Financial Services Authority, FSA in the UK. They are understaffed, outgunned, and politically hesitant to challenge a major bank. The evidence disappears into a bureaucratic void. He then contacts a financial journalist at a major newspaper. The journalist is fascinated, horrified. They begin working on a story. This is the point of no return. The moment internal dissent becomes public exposure. From key meetings, His access to databases is temporarily restricted for security updates. Colleagues grow cold. He receives a call from the bank's legal department, a friendly chat about confidentiality agreements and the severe personal liability for leaking proprietary models. It's not a threat. It's a statement of fact. He is now a marked man inside the institution, but he's also now a beacon to those outside who are starting to piece the puzzle together. For a brief, shining moment, he is the insider who can blow the whole scheme open. Then in late 2007 or early 2008, as the first major bank, Bear Stearns, begins to teeter, our analyst goes quiet. His contact with the journalist becomes sporadic, then stops. Calls go to voicemail. Finally, an email auto-reply. He is unavailable indefinitely. No dramatic resignation, no fiery public letter, just silence. He is erased from the game board. The disappearance, a professional vanish. His vanishing is notable for its quiet professional efficiency. It is not the stuff of spy novels. He doesn't flee the country, or if he does, no border control has a record of it. There is no missing persons report filed by family, suggesting they know he is safe, or have been persuaded not to look. His financial footprint doesn't go dark, it fades. Accounts are closed properly. Subscriptions end. It is the digital equivalent of a room being carefully cleaned, not ransacked. This is the disappearance of a man who understands systems. Perhaps he was offered a golden silence package, a massive confidential severance with legal clause that force him to disappear and never speak. Perhaps he was threatened with not just legal destruction, but physical consequences for him and his family. Perhaps, seeing the avalanche about to hit and knowing he was holding the spotlight, he simply chose to walk away into a new anonymous life before he could be crushed by the blame or the fallout. Whatever the method, the effect was the same. The key witness was removed from the scene before the crime scene tape went up. When the system finally did collapse in September 2008, with the fall of Lehman Brothers, the story was framed as a tsunami, a perfect storm, a systemic failure. The language was of natural disaster, not criminal fraud. There were no villains, only victims and flawed models. The one person who could have stood before a congressional committee or a camera and said, "No, here is the email. Here is the model we knew was false. Here are the people who gave the order," was gone. His testimony was eliminated before it could be given. The aftermath, the crime without a criminal. The years following 2008 were defined by a profound, unsettling absence, the absence of justice. A handful of low-level traders were prosecuted. A few banks paid fines that were fractions of their profits, with no admission of guilt. The architects of the crisis, the CEOs, the heads of risk, the heads of investment banking, walked away with their fortunes intact, many to write books and give lectures. The official inquiries produced thousands of pages that described a failure of regulation and collective blindness. They were masterpieces of passive voice. Mistakes were made. Risks were underestimated. Our vanished analyst was the antidote to the passive voice. He was the active verb. He was the man who could say, "They knew, he ordered, we falsified." By disappearing, he allowed the narrative to stay fuzzy, systemic, and ultimately unprosecutable. He transformed a potential criminal trial into a philosophical debate about risk and capitalism. You can't handcuff an economic philosophy. Speaking of systems designed to obscure the truth, let's talk about the architecture of your documentary. You're building a film about this ghost in the financial machine. You need audio that conveys the sterile tension of a trading floor, the crushing weight of a secret, and the eerie silence of a vanished witness. You need the hum of server banks, the frantic tap of keys, the ominous ring of a phone in a quiet office, the empty sound of a held breath. But constructing that soundscape without getting entangled in complex rights issues can feel like its own financial crisis. That's where epidemic sound comes in. Think of it as your transparent, stable asset for sound. A massive library of high-quality, royalty-free music and sound effects. No hidden liabilities. No toxic clauses. Just solid, reliable access to thousands of tracks. From cold, tense scores that mimic flickering market ticks to oppressive, droning soundscapes of corporate dread, to the absolute, void-like silence of a missing person's digital trail. Need the sound of a dot matrix printer spitting out a damning report? The muffled argument behind a CEO's closed door? The hollow tone of a phone left off the hook? They've got it. Their search tools help you audit and find the precise sonic evidence. Right now, Epidemic Sound is offering a free trial. Use the link in the description to access the library. Thanks to Epidemic Sound for sponsoring this investigation into the ledger. Now back to the empty chair where the witness should have sat. The legacy. The ghost in the machine. The vanished whistleblower's legacy is a haunting what if. What if he had testified? What if his memo had been front-page news in 2007? Could it have stopped the crisis? Unlikely. The machine was too big, too greedy. But it could have changed the aftermath. It could have provided the hard evidence needed for real criminal indictments, not just symbolic fines. It could have named names. It could have shattered the myth of the perfect storm and established in the public record that the crisis was not an accident but a looting. His absence created a vacuum filled with complexity. It allowed every participant to point in every direction. The bankers blamed the regulators. The regulators blamed the rating agencies. The rating agencies blamed the models, and the public was left with an anger that had no specific target, just a diffuse corrupt them. He became the ghost of accountability. A reminder that in the modern financial world, the ultimate risk isn't market collapse. It's being the one person who can prove the collapse was intentional. The modern parallel. The blueprint for silence. His case is not unique. It's a blueprint. It established a modern playbook for dealing with existential threats from within. Ignore the evidence internally. Isolate the whistleblower professionally. Intimidate them legally and personally. If they persist, remove them, not through violence, but through a combination of lucrative silence agreements and the threat of total personal and professional destruction. Let the ensuing catastrophe be framed as a complex, no-fault disaster. We've seen shades of this with other whistleblowers who expose systemic dangers. The goal is never to win an argument. The goal is to eliminate the credible narrator who can turn a complex story into a simple, prosecutable crime. So, what happened to the whistleblower who predicted the 2008 crash? The revelation is not about his fate. It's about his function. He wasn't a man who vanished. He was a piece of evidence that was successfully destroyed. His story reveals the true architecture of power in the 21st century. The greatest crimes are not committed in dark alleys, but in broad daylight, using spreadsheets and legal contracts. And the primary obstacle to justice for those crimes is not a lack of evidence, but the systematic elimination of the human beings who can interpret that evidence for a jury. He wasn't killed. He was deleted. His knowledge was rendered forensically useless by removing him from the timeline. He was made to be a ghost, so the crime could be made to look like a force of nature. The 2008 financial crisis was the crime of the century, but the perfect crime within that. Crime was the disappearance of the one witness who could have provided a coherent first-hand account of the felony. They didn't need to destroy his documents. They just needed to destroy his voice. And they did. His empty chair in front of every post-2008 inquiry is the most important symbol of our age. It represents the chilling understanding that in our complex world, the most effective way to cover up a trillion-dollar fraud is not to hide the files. It's to make the person who understands the files simply cease to exist.